Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of A Long Way Down, which was shown at the CineStar movie theaters at Potsdamer Platz. The film was directed by Pascal Chomet. It was produced by Finola Dwyer and Amanda Posey. It was written by Jack Thorne, and it was based on the book by the same name, written by Nick Hornby. And it stars Pierce Brosnan, Toni Collette, Aaron Paul, and Imogen Poots. Now, this was a film I was quite excited to see based on the trailers I've been watching. In fact, this basically premiered at the 64th International Berlin Film Festival, known in Germany as the Berlinale. And after watching the entire film in its entirety, I have to say, it was pretty good all throughout. Now, story wise, this film, in terms of its premise, is really nothing new for me. In fact, I can easily compare this film to another film and an anime television series. The film I would like to compare this film to would have to be Tokyo Godfathers, because, well, this film basically had four. I'm referring to A Long Way Down. Now, Tokyo Godfathers had three people who basically met each other by chance and started out as total strangers. That's pretty much the same premise that A Long Way Down started off as. And by chance, they find a baby girl in a dumpster and they try to find the real mother. And a lot of happenings come along their way, especially a lot more tragic pasts and the like. Now, Welcome to the NHK basically talks about the dark side of Japanese society with hikikomoris, obsessive otakus, um, suicide pacts, and a lot of psychological details that are so well handled throughout the entirety of the show. In fact, I have a DVD of this anime, though it's all the way back in Cebu, and I've watched the entire series for several times, and that's how much I love this anime. Now, there are a couple of episodes that talk about suicide. The first one being with Hitomi Kashiwa and a group of people that she's met at the online suicide meeting. They try to do the deed, but they are stopped by Misaki and Yamazaki. And Sato apparently join along with them. And another episode that talked about suicide was basically the flashbacks of Misaki's mom and when Misaki and Sato tried to do the deed themselves. So, yes, the premise of the film is really nothing new for me, but it makes up for it for its comedy, well, black comedy to be specific, and the drama that the film has, and especially the characters of the film, which I'll talk about later. Basically, this is a character driven story in which each character tells their side of the story, how they feel, how they look at each other in terms of how they act, how they do things, how they cope up with their circumstances. So, yes, the story may not be anything new, but it's totally decent all throughout. Now, the cinematography was handled very well. There were no shaky cam movements, and I thought the cinematography was handled flawlessly. I especially loved the opening credits, in which some of the letters fell down or something, and I definitely felt that it pretty much sets the tone of this film. It may not be pretty, but it's definitely worth your time, as the film would like to imply with you. Now, the characters are pretty good all throughout, though not entirely fleshed out, save for Maureen. Now, Martin basically is a rich and very famous celebrity. He has a well to do family. He copes up very well, but for some reason, he wants to commit suicide. And I'm like thinking to myself, my goodness, how could someone as successful as Martin want to commit suicide? I think it makes sense because, well, now that he has everything, what does he have to live for? I mean, sure, he's got a family, but other than that, he feels like he has everything. Why does he have to live still? I think I could kind of see why he wants to commit suicide, but other than that, it just comes off as kind of shallow. But he's still quite a very interesting character because he can be sarcastic, he can be witty, he can be a lot of fun to watch. But the motive that he has for suicide kind of feels very selfish on his part. Now, Maureen is a pretty interesting character. Sure, she starts off as quite goofy and quite passive, but a lot more has been revealed about her. She's a single mom who is struggling to take care of her only son who has cerebral palsy by the name of Maddie. And I'm sure that's probably why she wanted to try to kill herself because she basically couldn't cope with the huge challenges of it all. Trying to take care of Maddie, handling all of the pains and the agony of being a single mom. It makes sense that maybe the father has passed away, or maybe he's moved very far away and has divorced her, but we don't know that much of her family life. We don't know what has happened to her first husband. Was he dead? Or did he end up running away? Did he end up divorcing her for good because he can't handle the responsibilities of a father of a son who is diagnosed with cerebral palsy? We'll never know. But other than that, I thought she was quite interesting, if only by a little bit. But she's still a pretty good character. It's just that I kind of wish that a lot more is fleshed out. Now, Jess is another interesting character because she's quite a rebel. She's a rebellious young girl who feels that she's constricted by her strict father, all because of the death of her older sister, Jennifer. She feels like an ugly duckling, a graceless little ugly duckling. Now, I can definitely compare Jess to Helga Pataki because both of these young girls, well, Jess is slightly older, or a lot older, being in her late teens, early 20s. Now, both of these girls basically suffer the same thing. Their parents pretty much feel that the older daughter is their shining light. She is a lot more talented, a lot more of a star. That she's basically their sun, moon, and stars, whereas the younger daughter is basically, well, nothing to them, completely ignored. And while Big Bob is a huge blowhard and at times he can be mean, well, Jess's father, he is pretty stern, but he can care for her. But there are times that they do keep their distance, and not so much is known about Jess's mom. It's safe to say that Jess as a character is pretty interesting. Yes, she is rebellious. She is unlike any other girl. She is quite unique in her own way. But like I said, not a lot is fleshed out about her. Now, JJ is, well, he's only okay. Well, not a lot is fleshed out about him, which I definitely feel is pretty much the character's, well, the four main characters' fatal flaw. Not so much is fleshed out about them. Basically, Martin is a rich celebrity, Maureen is the single mom, Jess is the rebel chick, and JJ is the only American guy who happens to have a job as a pizza boy. But there's something interesting about JJ. He used to be a part of an indie rock band, but somehow along the way they basically broke up and now he has a job as a pizza boy. And he is not liking it. I'm sure that was just definitely why he ended up trying to kill himself because let's face it, his everyday job being told what to do in terms of a very small company and trying to live through this is definitely not easy, especially if you used to be on the top. So basically, that's it. The characters are pretty good for the most part, though not a lot is fleshed out about them. Sure, there are some other characters that are also okay, but they don't always have that much screen time. But the one character that I didn't really care for was Kathy because I felt like she was just shoehorned in the entire story just to cause a little friction between JJ and Jess because we all knew from the beginning that JJ and Jess would be a great couple. Kathy, I felt, was just shoehorned in, and that was pretty much it. Now, with pretty good characters, there were a lot of great actors all around. Now, Pierce Brosnan was an actor I knew from the 90s as James Bond, since I'm a 90s kid myself. And my first James Bond really had to be Pierce Brosnan. That's pretty much the actor I would usually associate with James Bond. Sure, older fans of James Bond would usually associate James Bond to Sean Connery, but since I was a 90s kid, I would usually associate James Bond with Pierce Brosnan. And here, as Martin, I thought he was just absolutely fantastic. Heck, this was the same person who made a guest appearance in The Simpsons, playing this evil machine who at first is very kindly, basically cooking for the Simpsons family, but wanting to kill Homer so that he can have Marge all to himself. Wow. Now, in this film, I thought he was very good. He still had his sense of wit, charm, and humor that he uses very, very effectively. Toni Collette as Maureen, I thought she was just absolutely great at her role. She was able to portray Maureen as a sweet, gentle, yet somewhat clueless and, well, goofy and quite a passive person. And another thing I like to add about Maureen is that, yeah, she does have her fears. And another thing that I've seen to notice about Maureen is that she's pretty much the stay at home wife and has never really traveled or experienced anything new. And I definitely felt that Toni Collette as Maureen, especially in that moment where she says, "It's all too fast." I thought she executed that very well. Aaron Paul and Imogen Poots, who were also the main stars of Need for Speed, I definitely liked their portrayals in this film. I actually liked these two better in this film than in Need for Speed because, well, that film was beyond mediocre, but this film definitely proved their acting chops to be slightly better. In fact, their chemistry was absolutely great all throughout. You absolutely knew from the beginning that they would be together. And boy, did they pull it off very well. The dynamics that these two have were absolutely great. Imogen Poots was able to make such a rebellious figure very believable in terms of playing Jess. And Aaron Paul as JJ, I thought he did a pretty good job. Sure, he could use a little bit more emotion, but other than that, less is more. I understand that he is simply trying to keep the principle of less is more. Now, Sam Neill as Jess's father, I thought was pretty good. Even though his role is kind of minute, I definitely have to say he was able to make a pretty memorable portrayal of a very stern, yet very understanding but somewhat clueless father. So overall, the movie definitely had a lot of solid acting all throughout, with Brosnan, Collette, Paul, Poots, and Neil being the standouts for me. Now, the music, I definitely have to say, was pretty great all throughout. It has this type of um, mysterious feel with um, the xylophones and a little bit of percussions, strings, what have you. I definitely really like the music of this film, and when it has to be dramatic, it makes such great use of strings. It has that indie movie feel. It has that dark comedy feel. And I thought the music, which was composed by Dario Marianelli, definitely suited the tone of this film. So overall, while the premise isn't anything new, and while the characters could be a lot more fleshed out, that doesn't mean that I didn't like the film. Quite the opposite. I enjoyed the film all throughout. I thought it was well acted. I definitely had a lot of fun watching the characters get themselves into a lot of situations and even bond. And the movie in its entirety was well shot all throughout. So, with that said, I will give this film a 4 out of 5 stars. Now, go ahead and watch it. This is definitely worth your time, and even if you've never really read the book, just go ahead and watch it anyway. For those of you who've read the book, I'm sure that you probably have noticed a lot of deviations from the original source material. That's very understandable, but other than that, it's definitely enjoyable. And I've also read some reviews of this film in particular, and not a lot of them were that favorable. Some people say that this film was very, um, very, it basically deviated from the original source material, and at times it just didn't feel anything new and fresh. But I've never really read the book, so I'm basing my opinions as a standalone film. I definitely felt that this is definitely worth your time, and like I said, just go ahead and watch it. You won't be disappointed with such great acting by Pierce Brosnan, Toni Collette, Aaron Paul, and Imogen Poots. You won't miss a thing with this film. And if you're a fan of Tokyo Godfathers and Welcome to the NHK, then give this film a try. You won't be disappointed. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in later tonight where I review Out of the Furnace, starring Christian Bale. Until then, see you later.